In wake of the attacks that took place in Paris at the hands of ISIS, I thought I would put together a video dispelling some of the myths surrounding Syrian refugees. Myth number 1. The terrorists in Paris were refugees from Syria. As of November 24, 2015, none of the attackers in Paris have been identified as Syrian nationals. All the identified assailants to this point have been confirmed to be citizens of European Union countries. This suggests that their radicalization was likely homegrown on the continent and not imported via an exodus of distressed Syrian refugees. The Syrian passport found near one of the attackers' bodies has been confirmed to be a fake. Germany's Interior Minister Thomas de Maizière suggested that the fake passport found at the bombing site could have been part of an Islamic State attempt to create a false trail. 2. The vetting process for refugees is too easy. In recent weeks, many U.S. politicians have vocalized their opinion on allowing Syrian refugees into the U.S., many speculating that the process is too easy. This could not be further from the truth. Unlike European and Middle Eastern countries, the U.S. has some of the strictest and most intensive processes for accepting refugees. The thorough process on average can take between 18 months to 24 months. And for a Syrian, that process can take even longer. To enter the U.S. as a refugee, there are an array of hurdles that must be passed, and rightfully so. First, you must be screened and declared by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. If cleared, they will then refer you to the United States, which only about 1% get referred. Once referred, you go through several rounds of security clearance checks performed by the Department of Homeland Security, National Counterterrorism Center, and other intelligence communities. A medical screening and a mandatory in-person interview in which the interviewer will travel to you takes place. Biometric data and personal information are vetted at every step of the process. Family trees are even identified. The slightest inconsistency in your answers or responses can void the entire application. Stacey Blake, the Director of Government and Community Relations for the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, was quoted on the thoroughness of the process. Quote, "Refugees are the most vetted individuals who enter the United States. For someone who is intent on causing harm, there are easier ways to enter the United States." Unquote. If a foreign terrorist group plans on carrying out an attack on U.S. soil, the refugee exodus is not a very viable option as a result of the intensive screening and the wait of up to 2 years or more. The most viable way to enter would be as a tourist or on a student visa. For example, 70 million tourists enter the U.S. every year without having to undergo such an extensive screening. In the FBI director's words, quote, "The process for entering the country as a tourist or student on a visa, such as the 9/11 attackers, is far easier for a potential terrorist, and also skips the grueling journey that most refugees have to endure to enter the U.S." Unquote. 3. Syrian refugees are mostly military-aged men. Ben Carson and conservative sites have been misleading in the posting of the actual statistics on Syrian refugees. So I went right to the source, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. UNHCR's data show that 50.5% of refugees are women. Females aged 18 to 59 make up 23.9% of the refugees, while males in that age group, military-aged, make up 21.8%. Children 11 years and younger account for 38.5% of Syrian refugees. Conservative sites have been quoting misleading numbers about the percentage of males, putting them usually around 72%. However, this accounts for refugees from 9 other countries as well, and only for Mediterranean sea crossings, half of which are Syrian. Single men of combat age represent only 2% of those admitted to the U.S. 4. We are taking in too many of them already. Obama wants to accept 100,000 Syrian refugees or more. Goodness. Since 2012, the U.S. has only admitted a mere 1,854 refugees from Syria. That is less than the population of over 331 cities in North Dakota. For goodness sakes, North Dakota only has 357 cities. In that same amount of time, Germany has admitted more than 92,000 refugees. There are 4 million refugees fleeing from violence in Syria registered by the UNHCR. The president has vowed to take in 10,000 of them this year. That's just 0.25% of the entire registered Syrian refugee population, not including individuals who have not been registered by the UNHCR. Syrians make up just 2.3% of global total refugees accepted by the U.S. as of August 2015. The U.S. already takes in about 70,000 refugees per year. Their proposed increase would bring only about 85,000 people into the U.S. in 2016, and possibly 100,000 by 2017. However, conservative candidates are misleading when they throw this number around. This number accounts for the total global refugees that the president has vowed to allow, which ranges from people from South America, Africa, China, Vietnam, Indonesia, etc., as well as those from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Number 5. Muslim countries don't even take in any refugees. Why should we? They should help their own people. Okay, let's just get started. This one is pretty simple. They are. Turkey's let in 1.9 million, Lebanon 1.1 million, Jordan about 630,000, Saudi Arabia anywhere between 100,000 to 500,000, Iraq 247,000, and UAE 242,000. Those are some of the top countries hosting Syrian refugee populations. The next closest Western country is Germany, with around 200,000 registered refugees. The US so far has taken in 2,200. 6. Refugees and immigrants are more likely to be terrorists. As a matter of fact, America has more to fear from attacks by the radical right, according to a study by Washington Research Center New America Foundation. Since 9/11, there have been 48 people killed by domestic right-wing terrorists and 26 killed by homegrown Muslim extremists. Since 1976, over 200 bombings and arson attacks have taken place on abortion clinics carried out by right-wing extremists. The Southern Poverty Law Center has a list of 112 documented radical right-wing terrorist plots since 1995. On average, that's 5.5 a year. The plots included plans to blow up government buildings, banks, refineries, utilities, clinics, synagogues, mosques, memorials, and bridges, to assassinate police officers, judges, politicians, civil rights figures, and others, and to illegally amass machine guns, missiles, explosives, and biological chemical weapons. One plot was designed to kill as many as 30,000 people, 10 times the number of people killed on September 11th. According to the American Immigration Council, refugees are less likely to engage in criminal behavior than native-born Americans. Quote, a variety of different studies using different methodologies have found immigrants are less likely than the native-born to engage in either violent or nonviolent antisocial behaviors. 7. Governors can prevent immigrants from relocating to their state. In the wake of the Paris attacks, 31 governors have taken a stance to reject Syrian refugees. However, it is not up to governors to decide immigration policy. That right remains strictly at the federal level. The Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution lays out that federal laws take precedence over state laws, meaning that governors cannot decide that they won't take refugees if that's what the federal government wants. The Supreme Court reiterated this in its 2012 decision in Arizona versus United States. Now, the governors can make it harder for refugees to resettle in their states by denying them access to state-controlled resources and funds, but they can't forbid them from entering their borders. All these governors are in exact violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution by accepting refugees from other countries but not those from Syria. 8. We've never handled a situation like this before. Goodness gracious. We have been down this road throughout history numerous times. Some experiences were positive and others negative. I respect Obama for doing his best as president and trying to avoid repeating negative mishaps in history. For example, in 1939, the transatlantic liner, the St. Louis, attempted to enter Cuba. It was carrying 937 passengers, many of whom were waiting for American visas. Most of the passengers were European Jewish refugees, fleeing the rise of the Nazis. When Cuba refused to let them in, the passengers appealed to the United States directly, but the U.S. also refused to admit them. The St. Louis was forced to return to Europe, where many of its passengers died in the Holocaust. The xenophobic behaviors being exhibited by many Republican governors and media outlets are the same behaviors exhibited during World War II, when thousands of Jewish refugees were denied entrance to the U.S. for fear of being Nazi spies. The same reason after the wake of Pearl Harbor, we rounded up everyone of Japanese ancestry and threw them into internment camps in the desert. For a country made of immigrants and refugees, xenophobia has no place in our society. That's shameful. That's not America. That's not who we are. Number 9, the bad grape analogy. One last statement to discredit is comparing Syrian refugees to a poisonous grape in a bunch of grapes. The analogy suggests that you wouldn't eat from a grape bunch if you knew one of the grapes was poisonous. First off, that analogy does not work when we are talking about real-life, breathing human beings. Is it possible for a terrorist to enter as a Syrian refugee? Yes. However, not very plausible. Should that deter us from saving thousands of other lives? I say no. If we act in that manner, we give right into the way these terrorist organizations wish to control us, which is with fear. We cannot let them dictate our values on humanity. Being from an immigrant family, I am thankful that my family was permitted to enter this great country and not barred from entering under the precept that someone on board that immigrant ship might become a criminal. If the US worked under this precept, a lot of us wouldn't be here. I am thankful for men like Oskar Schindler, a German who gave refuge to 1,200 Jews and saved them from immediate and certain death. As a result of saving those individuals today, there are more than 7,000 descendants of Schindler's Jews living. Giving life to one is creating life for thousands. To wrap this up, every generation has had unfounded reactions to refugees, from violent bum Irish to communist Cubans and Vietnamese. The only time in history that fear of a massive refugee influx would create mass destruction in America actually came true would be the one we will be celebrating this week. And with that said, happy Thanksgiving.